All right, welcome everyone to the COVID-19 listening session hosted by PASA Sustainable Agriculture. Today we're going to have a listening session on H-2A workers. Today joining me, I'm Hannah Smith Brubaker, Executive Director of PASA, is Alyssa Charney from U.S. Senator Bob Casey's office, and John Hollay from United Fresh Produce. Our agenda for today is that I will give a brief introduction, and then I'll ask Alyssa to provide any update that she might have. Then we'll turn to John, and then we'll begin with our moderated questions. The order for questions today will be those that have already been submitted. Second will be questions that are submitted through the Q&A function on the session. And if there is time, we will take call-in questions. And if not, we'll gather those questions after this webinar today and try to get those questions answered for you. So we started getting calls as an organization really from the minute that COVID-19 was on our radar regarding all sorts of potential complications with having adequate workforce for this season. More recently, people have been running into complications with getting H-2A seasonal workers to be able to arrive safely here in the country and starting to work. So we have asked Alyssa and John to join us today to give us a brief update, and then we will move directly into questions. So Alyssa, if you're willing to start.
Yep. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for the invitation to join you all today. My name is Alyssa Charney. I handle agriculture for Senator Casey. I think, I really am grateful for the opportunity, I think, to mostly just hear from you all in terms of the challenges that you are currently facing related to H-2A workers. The senator is really grateful for the work that you all are doing every day when it relates to food and agriculture. And I think especially grateful for the work that you continue to do, especially given the challenges that we're all facing related to COVID-19. The senator has weighed in writing to Secretary Pompeo to address the situation, ease challenges that we know folks are facing, and we know that those challenges continue. So I think, I mostly am here to listen, to understand as much as possible kind of what is happening on the ground. I'm grateful that John is here as well to really provide an update from his perspective on the ways that the United Fresh has continued to engage updates from his end that he's able to share, and then take back the questions, concerns, challenges that you all are facing back to the senator, and continue to monitor and understand ways that we can be helpful as things move forward.
Great, thank you, Alyssa. John, are you willing to give a little update from your end?
And thank you to Alyssa and obviously for PASA for holding this ability to converse with folks within the industry who are dealing with it on the front lines. We are grateful here at United Fresh for the great work that all of agriculture is doing together to tackle this issue, because we have so many shared problems. So I will talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've heard, but much like Alyssa, I'm very interested in hearing on what you are all experiencing on the ground on a daily basis. We've been addressing this issue for the last couple months, frankly, because our members use the H-2A program quite a bit, and obviously the use of the program is different region to region, but it's so vital to our food supply, which is obviously, if you want to put together a list of the essential groups that are out there, food supply is certainly at the top of that list. So I'm going to start with a couple of the issues that we've been dealing with and trying to get ahead of. Number one is making sure that we had an agreement in place with Mexico to keep H-2A workers moving across the border. We are very pleased with where they are at right now. Initially, the determination was made that only previous H-2A workers would be processed, and that has changed thanks to our advocacy and the advocacy of many of you and others in the agricultural workforce, because we were at a point in which we thought we were only have 50% of our workers being processed. That is not the case. Now we're happy to report that Mexico is doing a good job of processing workers, and that is our major market for employees coming through the system. Along those lines, I'll just add that we are experiencing some challenges with other countries. We've had issues in Guatemala, South Africa, Jamaica, Peru, just to name a few. And some of those are because those countries are closing their own borders for people who are traveling to the United States. And so that's something that we're definitely going to keep an eye on. And make sure that we can resolve as the growing season ramps up for many of our products that we represent here at United Fresh. I would say that there are a couple internal issues within the United States that we are definitely monitoring and have advocated on. Those include making sure that workers that are here can be moved to other operations as need arises for harvesting, and making sure that that goes as smoothly as possible. We are in talks to extend visa terms for agricultural workers. We don't have any resolution on that issue right now, but our position has been and will continue to be that if you're a worker that's here in the United States and you are healthy and able-bodied, that we want to make sure that you can stay in the United States, so that if at the end of your visa term you're sent home and you're not allowed to return, that we make sure that we deal with those issues as well. The last piece that I will add is, and I'm happy to take questions on this as well, is that there has been concern amongst employers that workers may try to take advantage of some of the health benefits that have been provided under our current situation. And we know that that is an issue for employers. We haven't seen that really come to fruition right now, but the concern was that a worker would arrive, say that they were ill, which they may or may not be, and then eventually take sick leave after that for family and medical leave purposes. We have not seen that within the industry, but we're always, trying to make sure that we keep an eye on that. There are a lot of other issues that are involved with regards to benefits, wages, and things of that nature that we are continuing to monitor, both from a United Fresh perspective, but also from the entire agriculture sphere. So those are all things that we're keeping an eye on. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Hannah, I think if you're speaking, you might still be muted.
Yeah, it's been muted. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Thanks. First question is, Secretary Perdue ruled that H-2A workers can only be accepted this year if they have held an H-2A visa in the past 4 years. How does this help me as a first time hiring H-2A workers on my farm?
So this is John. I'm happy to take that question. I think there are kind of two parts to that. If you are a new employer You still have the ability to access workers that have participated in the past 4 years. Just because they were not on your operation, that doesn't mean that you cannot bring them in. So we were, again, pleased by the flexibility that was provided for 4 years of work that you may have produced in the past, but it does not apply the same to actual employers. It's about the employee. So I think that's a really important distinction to make.
Okay, thank you, John. And you mentioned a bit about this, but we have a question. The Mexican consulate appears to be prioritizing H-2A returning workers. Have consulates in other countries been instructed to do the same?
Great question. Mexico is prioritizing H-2A workers. We do not have the ability to instruct individual consulates on who they should prioritize, but that's why we're trying to work closely with the individual governments for who they prioritize as moving through their systems. The Mexican consulates have been the most important because, again, that's where we get most of our workforce for. But we are pursuing that opportunity with other countries as well to make sure that H-2A workers are seen as essential to the United States, and that those countries designate them as they go through the consulate process as such.
Okay, thank you. Next question. It appears difficult or impossible to fly workers out of many countries like Guatemala. Can arrangements be made to travel via Mexico?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one as well. The answer is yes. Obviously, that changes on a day-by-day basis because countries are changing who is allowed to travel to and from. But we did have an issue in which we had a pretty significant grower in Texas that was trying to bring in Guatemalan workers. We were able to get those workers shifted into Mexico and processed through their consulates. So that is definitely something that we're watching and continuing to monitor.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How can we prioritize consular appointments and visa processing for H-2A workers once the consulates begin to reopen?
This is John again. I'm not going to try and give anyone a false answer here, so I'm going to have to say that we don't really know how that process is going to work or play out. We are continuing to work with folks on a daily basis at the consular level and making sure that we can move as many people as we can, but it is a case-by-case basis. There are other visa priorities that are out there, and so we are having to compete with them, but we are making sure that H-2A is considered as essential in as many places as we can.
Okay. Next question. What is the protocol if a worker is allowed to board a plane, but when they land, they have a fever and are quarantined?
I'm not an expert on that field, so I have to defer to if anyone else on the phone has some greater information on that. It is a challenge that we have been facing. It is also a challenge domestically. If I could just go off kind of on that and maybe get ahead of another question. We've had the issue of what happens when an H-2A worker is determined to have COVID-19 and they're already in the United States. We are looking at those options and the reality of maybe having to provide separate housing for workers that either have COVID-19 or were directly exposed to someone who has COVID-19. But I have not dealt with that specific question as of yet, but it is certainly something that's on our minds. So I know that doesn't really answer the question, but yes, we are concerned about what happens when a person enters the United States. When they left their home country, they were fine. When they arrived, they were not. Or when they arrived at the job site, they were fine, and then they are not. So it is very much on the minds of our growers in the United Fresh Produce Association membership.
Okay, thank you. And I should have said before we started the Q&A, it's definitely not our expectation that anyone's going to know how to answer every one of these questions, because things are changing by the minute. But in follow-up to today's webinar, as things change, we will amend the answers to the questions as we get guidance. The next question, Alyssa, is probably for you. If we are running into issues, what role does the legislature have in helping us resolve the problem?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, as a first step for folks to definitely be in touch, we are working with our constituent services team in the state as well as my colleagues who are on the immigration and State Department side of things. So please do definitely flag issues as they arise. I'm grateful for Hannah for connecting us with folks, and we will do our best to look into getting answers and also putting pressure on different aspects of the process where we are able.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, the next question. Many return workers from Mexico applying for H-2A work visas are eligible for an interview waiver if they are in good standing and they have a history of working in the US within the past year. Our H-2A workers are from Peru, where the US consulate there has a different policy and interview waivers. Our workers are reliable and have never had any issues while here in the US. Will there be any opportunities to have workers from Peru or other countries aside from Mexico to have interview waivers if they have a reliable history of traveling and returning to their home country?
So this is John from United Fresh. A great question. Again, some of those issues are really more about what the actual country of origin policies are for travel to the United States. But we are definitely trying to work out as many agreements as we can as possible with other countries to make sure that all H-2A workers, regardless of previous experience, are prioritized and move through the process. What we cannot do is tell other countries how to run their own systems. And the concern here is if they end up being able to come to the United States, but are not allowed to return to their home countries, what do we do with those workers? And so that's one of the reasons that we have been pushing for extended worker visas for H-2A and H-2B visa users because of those concerns. But it's a great question. We're trying to work out as many agreements as we can with as many countries as we can, but some of it is based on their own internal decisions.
Okay, thank you. Next question. There are many other workers here in the US already with work assignments that are being canceled. Some of these workers are eligible to transfer to other assignments, such as our farm, where they are needed. If we were to transfer workers from other assignments, would we be able to release these workers later in the season, perhaps to return to their original assignment, and give our returning workers an opportunity to interview for a work visa once travel restrictions are beginning to be eased? Our returning workers have shown us a commitment to our farm and have become like family to us. They have a skill set that is unique to our farm and are not easily replaced. We want to find replacement workers, but we also want to give our returning workers an opportunity to join us later in the season.
So this is John again. It's a very complicated question, and so I'll give a very complicated answer. We agree that returning workers should be prioritized because many of these workers are like family to all of you that are out there. And I come from a background in my family had a dairy farm, and we always had the same workers coming back every year. So definitely understand that and the importance of keeping that continuity. I would say it's unclear at this time. how that flexibility is going to be guaranteed. There is going to be continued information that's going to be put out by Department of Labor, Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Agriculture with regards to that, but it is very much top of mind to make sure that we can get returning workers back to the farms where they matter when they are needed. It's just a question of how that's going to work within what is an ever-changing travel structure and international regulatory structure. So I wish I had a clearer answer for whoever asked that question, but we are on top of it. We are monitoring it. We just don't have clarity at this point.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Typically, the Department of Labor and the consulate conducting visa interviews have concerns if workers are interviewing for an assignment with a start date that is not current. Will there be considerations for these interviews considering the travel restrictions are preventing workers from interviewing for the visas on schedule?
This is John. I have not run into that question as of yet. So I'm going to have to get back to whoever asked the question, but I'm more than happy. Please share my contact information and I can get an answer to that question, but I don't have an answer to that question at this moment.
Okay, and for many of these questions, if the farm is willing, we're happy to, designate who's asking the question. Otherwise, as you have offered, we'll just give them your contact information. Alyssa, do you have anything to add in terms of if farms have specific needs like this, them being able to, who should they contact to get questions answered?
Yeah, absolutely. You can share my contact information as well, Hannah, and I'm happy to work with my team through specific questions as we are able.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question. Will the Department of Labor consider the circumstances we are in when evaluating the need for future contracts? It does not seem that there are any guidelines for this, but we're concerned about how our needs will be evaluated by Department of Labor. We may be able to operate with local help while we're in the middle of this crisis, particularly since there are so many people laid off, but we will need a few skilled laborers and not just many unexperienced workers in order to be successful going into the future. Obviously, a lot of those local workers are not going to be available during a typical season.
Yeah, so that's a great question. As you know, the department has relaxed some of their standards, and then the plan is to make sure that always with the H-2A program, we are required, as all of you know, to hire American workers first. What we have seen over the last few decades is obviously American workers are not necessarily inclined to do farm work. With the jump in unemployment this morning that we saw, and which will likely to continue, those requirements stay in place to hire American workers. The question is whether or not those American workers will want to, number one, apply for those jobs, and number two, stay at those jobs. And so I would definitely caution everybody on the phone to say, make sure that you comply with the law on recruitment. That's number one, particularly in these times, because we are going to see stories about an unemployment jumping up to I think it was 4.4% this morning. Some of the numbers have put it up in the double digits in reality. But the question is a laid off, and I'm just being general here, is a laid off restaurant worker actually going to want to come and work on the farm? I don't know the answer to that, but we have to try and hire them. So I would just make sure that you comply with the regulations, and the law to the letter of the law. but make sure that we always continue ensuring that we have the flow of workers from other countries who we know are going to do the job. But it is definitely a question of concern and one that we don't have an answer to. I think this is going to be an issue that's going to pop up in the next few weeks in particular, where there are going to be an exorbitant amount of unemployed Americans, and farmers are going to have jobs open to them. The question is whether or not they are willing to do them. And so that is an issue that I think is going to get more problematic over the next couple of weeks. So again, I know I don't have the exact answer. The reality is we've just never been in a situation where we've had a glut of workers who may or may not, we don't know, are willing to do these jobs. And so that is a challenge that I think we're all going to learn a lot more about over the next couple of weeks. So again, sorry I don't have a direct answer to that question, but that's just the uncertainty that this situation has given us.
Okay. All right. The next question, I'll try my best with this. I thought they were supposed to pass, I guess this is H-2A workers were supposed to be able to pass through without an in-person interview if they had worked through H-2A on a farm last season. One worker was turned back after a 14-hour bus ride because he didn't work on my farm last season.
I would have to look at that case individually, but there is no reason that a worker should be pushed back because they did not work on an individual farm operation. There's no reason for that at all unless there are extenuating circumstances.
Okay.
But I'm happy to talk to that individual and go through their case if need be.
Okay. And just sort of while we're on that, John, do you want to just quickly say just a little bit about United Fresh Produce and sort of who you're representing and what, yeah, just.
Sorry, I've been on so many conference calls just to give my spiel. So United Fresh Produce Association is been around for over 100 years. We are the trade association for the fresh produce world, so fruits and vegetables. We're actually kind of unique in the trade association space in that we represent everybody from growers all the way up to retailers. So on our board, you will find small tomato and potato and tomato growers and everyone in between. All the way up through the supply chain, all the way up to the Walmarts and Krogers of the world. So we're kind of the one-stop shop for everything in produce, and we're thrilled to be part of this conversation here today, and always happy to advocate on behalf of all of the folks that are involved in the supply chain that is the fresh produce world. And I'll just say as an aside, a lot of our folks are doing well. A lot of folks are making sure that they get every last apple and grape and lime at their grocery store. But we also represent the folks who do restaurant work, who do food service work, and they're struggling right now. And so we're working a lot on making sure that we can redirect the food. What we do not have right now at this moment is a lack of food in this economy. What we have at this moment is a lack of ability to deliver the amount of food that we have through this current economy. So when schools are shut down, when food service is essentially shut down, hotels, restaurants, we need to make sure that we can get that fresh produce. Obviously, there's a shelf life to that produce to the people who need it. That is what we are dealing with right now. And so I would encourage you to make sure that you reach out to your members of Congress, reach out to your local officials, your food banks, your school systems. If you have produce, don't let it rot in the fields. Don't throw it away. There are people who need this food, and we are trying our best to make sure that everybody who needs it can get it, even if it's not through the channels that they are used to getting it through. So thank you for that prompt. As I said, I forget to give that message sometimes on calls like this, but we are trying our best to make sure that we can connect people who have food to get it to people who need food. And if they can't get it through a restaurant, if they can't get it through a hotel, if they can't get it through a school, we need to find those options on how to get it to them. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. I think particularly given that so many of our members are involved in direct marketing to customers, it's many are finding that the demand is tripled. And it's actually, sort of how you've said, even just the distribution of it all is quite a complex thing to be navigating right now. So, okay, here's sort of a, well, the question is, why not another batch of permanent residents as happened in the mid-'80s? This situation isn't going to improve. So maybe not specific to H-2A. I don't know if either of you has anything in terms of responding to that.
Could I have clarification on that? Just one more time.
I'll read it again. I'm not sure if this is someone who's on the call and later can clarify, but basically, I think they're asking for some sort of fix to immigration, even beyond H-2A, in terms of offering permanent residency for farm workers. They're referring, yeah.
So United Fresh strongly supported the bipartisan House bill that passed last year, which would provide a path to legal permanent residence for people who are here already, and a revised H-2A program. And that is coupled with E-Verify enforcement that would be required on all farms. We think that the House bill was a good bill. We don't think it's a perfect bill. It's not the bill that we'd like to see passed out of the Senate because we think that there are improvements that can be made. But we are continuing to work with our Senate partners. The reality is, I was in nursery school in 1986, the last time that Congress passed immigration reform for agriculture. And so this is a difficult lift, and this is made even more difficult despite the need in this Congress right now. We are going to continue to look at ways to expand opportunities for farmers to get workers and keep their own workers, but we are in a difficult place right now. It's hard enough to get bipartisan things passed in Congress on a daily basis. In this atmosphere, it is even more difficult. And I don't know if Alyssa, you want to comment on that, but I know it's been a priority for Senator Casey all along to make sure that we can fix this issue. But there's just so much other things going on that it is very difficult to move something like this along, even though the House has already passed the provision. So I'll turn it over to Alyssa if she wants to comment.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, John. And yeah, I think it's a good, relevant question. The general issue has for sure been front and center even before the pandemic that we are now facing. And I think, the senator has continued to hear from folks across Pennsylvania in all of the different production areas that labor is a major challenge. So I think, as John mentioned, it was promising and good to see the bipartisan action that was able to move through the House. The senator will continue to tell you that he, firmly believes we need comprehensive immigration reform, and that for agriculture, absolutely, this is a small business issue. So yeah, I think, right now we are obviously also simultaneously in crisis emergency mode. But I think both conversations and discussions are really important. Both the what are we going to do here and now in terms of ensuring that folks are able to get their workers here and have the support that they have depended on, but also recognize that this is a larger systemic issue, and that, yeah, we hope to see action and movement in the Senate as well.
Okay, thank you. We have a few more questions now. What happened to the proposal for multi-year H-2A visas?
Thank you for that question. It is a proposal that is still out there. We are looking for that option. We have pushed the administration to accept the fact that we need that option, not only during this crisis, but for the industry generally. There has been a great deal of pushback. I'm not going to lie. There has been a great deal of pushback, particularly from certain members of Congress and from the administration about extending the H-2A program, because there is a concern that, well, are you a temporary worker or are you not? The reality that I think, all understand on this call, but maybe not everybody else does throughout the country, is that these are essential workers. And they keep coming back here. I'm sure many of the people on the phone have had people on their farms for 20, 30 years. The same people who keep coming back here. They are not necessarily looking to become American citizens, but we are always dealing with the political reality that some people think they are. Much like the way that people are concerned that these workers are trying to take advantage of the family and medical sick leave. That's just not the reality on the ground. And I think all of you know that. And so what I would encourage each of you to do is to make sure that your member of Congress and your local officials know how important these people are to your conversations. But that they are not necessarily looking to kind of get a back door into America. Some of them want to become Americans. And if you've met these people, and I know you have, God, I'd love for them to become Americans, because these are the hardest working people I've ever met. But the reality is that there are politics greater than this that are making this issue very complicated. So I think we need to make sure that we tell people that these are good folks. They are necessary, they are essential, but that they need to make sure that they are abiding by the laws, and that we are taking care of them as best that we can. And I know that's kind of a wishy-washy answer to a very direct question, but the reality is I just look at this issue and say, we have so much opportunity here to help not only our growers, but our workers, and make sure that they will continue to come back to our farms. So, sorry.
That's okay. Okay, thank you. Next question is, I'm being told that it is incredibly burdensome to transfer H-2A workers from contracts that are being canceled. Is there any plan to reduce some of the red tape with transferring working during this crisis?
I will say from the industry side that absolutely there is an effort to reduce the burden on employers and employees about reducing that. I'm not aware of anything that has been passed yet that will ensure that. We've seen some flexibility, which is a good thing, but I'm not aware if there are legislative efforts. I don't know if Alyssa wants to comment on that.
Yeah, I think I would say the same, but can continue to look into opportunities there.
Okay, thanks. The next question is, how do we get health care for H-2A workers if they get ill with COVID-19 sometime during the season? We're worried about our workers incurring significant medical debt if this happens and are wondering if it's ethical to bring them here considering the high cost of health care in the US.
That's a very good question. The costs of dealing with this are very high. The desire for people to come to the United States to find work is always high. How we're going to work that out, I don't know. But that's why I mentioned earlier in the call that there are definitely some considerations about what do we do with a worker who gets here to the United States and is sick, or gets to the farm operation and they're sick. We want to take care of our workers. And I would commend to all of you the fact to share that story, because there are going to be a lot of logistical issues that come up out of this, particularly with regards to healthcare. And I think it's important for all of you to share with the community at large that you support these workers, you want the best for these workers. This is as much a logistical issue as it is a messaging issue. There are folks out there, and I'm going to opine here for a second. There are folks out there that think we do not care about these workers. We do. You do. And we need to show that you are caring about these workers. The logistics of how it's going to work out when an individual comes in that is sick is yet to be determined, because we are in unprecedented territory. But I think it is important for all of you to show the care you have for these workers. You know, what I always do is tell people that when I visited my family's dairy farm, that they trusted those people enough to allow them to interact and play with a 4-year-old kid. That is a really important story to tell. It's their kid, it's their farmer's kid. And I think that you need to share that message because it's a message that is not being shared. You trust these workers enough with your business, with your family. That is a message that I think we should share.
Thank you, John. One of the things that we're planning on doing after this webinar is to send a little survey out to people who have participated. And also we'll be sure to ask for comments from people and make sure people know who their legislators are and encourage them to be sharing these stories. I think that's a really important point. We have a couple other questions that aren't specific to H2. We have one more H-2A question, then we can potentially allow one or two call-in questions. One, we have a worker who returned home to Mexico to be with an elderly sick family who that worker wants to return on an H-2A visa. He previously worked for us under an alias. What's the best approach for this person? Should they get an interview at the consulate and what should they tell the interviewer? Feel free to comment on that, and then perhaps I can ask this person if they want to be directly in contact with one of you.
Yeah, I would suggest that they contact me or Alyssa directly.
Okay.
Because, there are some unknowns there.
Mm-hmm.
And the alias issue is something that we're all trying to deal with. That's why we're trying to pass immigration reform here in the Senate, is to deal with some of these issues. Because there have been loyal workers that have been coming to and from the United States. And I don't like to use the term undocumented workers. I like to use the word improperly documented workers. And so I think if I can talk to that individual, I'm more than happy to, and see if we can help them.
Okay. So at this point, we are happy to take a few call-in questions if people have them. The way that you do that is hit *9 on your phone if you're calling in, and we will unmute you. While that's happening, we did have a general question, and perhaps Alyssa, you want to answer this about, I'm now going to say, improperly documented farm workers, given that it's estimated that upwards as many as half the farm workers in this country do not have proper documentation. Is there anything in the works for things like health coverage or medical leave?
Yeah, I think, as has been mentioned, all really important questions, and all the more pressing as we kind of navigate our way through this crisis. I would love to, I think, connect folks with my colleagues who are on the immigration side of things more broadly, because yes, I mean, that is absolutely part of the broader considerations and challenges that the senator is concerned about, and that we are continuing to work on and think about. So I think if folks want to connect with me, I'm happy to connect you with the folks who are on our immigration team as well.
Okay, great. So it looks like we do not have any phone-in calls. So John and Alyssa, if you'd be willing to just give some closing comments, we'll probably finish up this listening session.
Alyssa, you're more than happy to go first.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think just really grateful for Hannah for setting this up, and John for being willing to join to really share the expertise and knowledge of the process, and up to date what has been going on. I think would echo some of the sentiments that John shared in terms of the importance of sharing your stories with us in the Senator's office, with others, to really underscore the significance of these workers to your operations and the work that you all are doing. And also, the value that they bring and the challenges that you all are facing. So yeah, just really grateful for the opportunity to hear from you all, for the work that you more broadly are doing as it relates to sustainable agriculture and the food system in Pennsylvania. And definitely welcome folks to reach out. Hannah will share my contact information. I think, we fully recognize that the challenges for agriculture are going to continue to evolve by the day, by the minute, as we also work our way through this crisis. So please keep us updated on the concerns and challenges that you all are facing related to H-2A workers, but also more broadly as we think about impacts on the food system in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and this is John. Great comments, Alyssa, and really great questions from all of the folks that are involved today. I would just leave you with this: is that the industry is fighting on your behalf day and night. and members of Congress are fighting on your behalf day and night. But we need those stories. We need to hear directly from you. So I know that, you know, I was a congressional staffer for 6 years and worked in the dairy industry. I'm sure we have many dairy friends on the phone here today, for 6 years. Please share your story. I know it's not always the most comfortable thing to do, but please share your story, and don't only share it with us, share it with folks on social media. Tell the story about how essential this industry is to the American people. Do not be hesitant to talk about the important work that you do. Please, please, please tell your story. We are going to continue to fight, and I will work with Alyssa and others within the delegation in Pennsylvania and others across the country to make sure that your story is heard, but we need those first-person stories. So share them, and I urge you to do so as soon as you can, as much as you can, because this issue is not going away today. It is going to continue on for a long time, and we need to make sure that the American public, that the international community is hearing directly from you all about the great work that you're doing each and every day. So please keep it up. So thank you so much for being together and for listening.
Thank you, John. We really appreciate both of you being able to be on the line with us today. I think this was very helpful. We'll be getting information from today's webinar out to everyone who attended and making it available to those who couldn't as well. In terms of PASA and general COVID-19 information, please feel free to visit pasafarming.org/COVID-19, where you'll find all sorts of resources, including today's webinar will be posted there as well. If you do work with people who are not able to access the information online, PASA has a 1-800 number. It's on the screen, 1-800-268-1599. There are 2 extensions currently. We might be adding some other ones. The first extension is 716, where you can get general guidance coming out of the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture for farms and farm markets. The second is extension 717. Every night, 717 is updated with the daily Department of Agriculture information update. So again, if you work with people who cannot access information online, they can call in every day and get that information read to them, any updates that we have. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. And it's going to take all of us working together to get through this. And I see a lot of that goodwill and a spirit for perseverance out there today. So thank you, everyone.